So the other day I was watching Metallica from the Back to the Beginning show, the live stream footage, when James Hetfield said this.
Look at all this love for heavy metal! Metallica is so grateful to be invited here and celebrate the band Black Sabbath. Because without Sabbath, there would be no Metallica. And thank you, boys, for giving us a purpose in life.
Which is very true and was very obvious to see at the Black Sabbath Back to the Beginning show, Ozzy's final show. How many musicians and bands became a band, got interested in music in general because of Black Sabbath and Ozzy, Metallica being one of them. And this isn't the first time that they've credited Ozzy and Black Sabbath for them being where they are today.
Black Sabbath and Ozzy is a significant part of the reason that you and I are standing here having a conversation today, because if it wasn't for them, and you can fill in the rest of it, you know.
And it's not just Metallica as a whole, it's also the individual members, not forgetting that now Rob from Metallica, the bass player, used to play bass in Ozzy's band as well. Being the bass player for Ozzy Osbourne is a huge opportunity and probably got him where he is today. If he wasn't the bass player in Ozzy, maybe he then wouldn't have gone on to be the bass player for Metallica.
Talk about Ozzy and the impact he's had on this band. Ozzy was the guy who said, hey, come on tour with me, right? I'm going to introduce you guys to America and a bigger audience. You must have thought you died and went to heaven, right? This was a huge break.
Ozzy at that time, when his solo career was really going, was known to bring out bands that were kind of on the verge of breaking. With us, it was our turn in '86. We had a new album, Master Puppets. We were in the majors. You know, we'd been playing in the minors for years, and now we were in the majors.
So it's quite clear to see no Ozzy, no Black Sabbath, maybe no Metallica. And think about that for a second, because just like Ozzy influenced Metallica, how many bands has Metallica influenced? Bands that we listen to today, bands that have been around a while, even they wouldn't exist potentially without Metallica, either inspiring them or giving them opportunities, just like Ozzy gave Metallica that opportunity and inspiration. What happens if we go backwards? What happens if we try and trace back this influence, trace back this kind of timeline, this family tree, if you want, of musical influence? How far back does it go, and who started this chain reaction of influence which has just spread and then kind of gone on to lead to the music and bands that we have today? So that's what I want to try and do in this video. So we've already figured out who Metallica's biggest influence is, at least one of them, Ozzy, Black Sabbath. But who influenced Ozzy? And it's probably both surprising and not surprising at the same time to find out that Ozzy's biggest influence, at least one of them, was the Beatles.
Nothing really happened to me in my life until the Beatles happened. Then it was like someone had turned the world on to me. They played She Loves You on the radio, and I remember thinking to myself, fucking hell, this is incredible. From that moment on, when I first heard She Loves You, I knew I wanted to be a rock star for the rest of my life.
Then one day I was walking down this road and I heard the Beatles for the first time, and it was like, wow. When I heard She Loves You, a light went up in my head and I was just besotted with them. I remember singing, that's it, that's what I want to do.
So there you have it, Ozzy, very much influenced by the Beatles. Ozzy knew, as soon as he heard the Beatles, I want to be a rock star, I want to get into music. And here he is actually meeting Paul McCartney for the first time.
Oh God, no, you're not let him in. Oh bloody hell. Hello, darling. How you doing? Yeah, all right, lovely, yeah.
It's great to meet you, man. It's been a lifetime ambition of mine. You guys made me start music, you know.
Come on, let's have a quick pecky. Come on.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
So we've gone from Metallica, influenced by Black Sabbath and Ozzy. Then we've looked at Ozzy's inspiration, what got him into music. It's the Beatles. He's openly admitted that on quite a few occasions. So what about the Beatles? Who influenced the Beatles? Because without Ozzy, we might not have Metallica. Without the Beatles, we might not have Ozzy and Sabbath. Not to mention all the other bands that are only in existence because of those bands themselves. But imagine, without the Beatles, how many bands and artists would not exist without the Beatles? Who started the Beatles' love for music? Who influenced them? And I've traced it back to three main influences on the Beatles: Buddy Holly, Bob Dylan, Elvis Presley.
He was an advocate of creating relationships with one's audience. His message of opening up oneself to your audience through personally reflective pop songs landed most heavily on John Lennon, a member and co-founder of the Beatles. Lennon wasn't the only Beatle under Bob's influence. George Harrison also got to improve his songwriting skills based on Dylan's influence.
There you have it.
You were telling me earlier on that got you and John writing was Buddy Holly. That would be the day. Is that true?
Yeah, you know, and you'll...
And then you had the horn rimmed.
which is Buddy.
Buddy.
Now
yeah.
that was great for John, because John wore horn rim. But any time there was any girls around, he'd whip them off, and then he couldn't see a bloody thing. And then when Buddy came out, oh yeah, put these on so he could get his horn rim done.
Legitimised the use of the horn rim.
That's pretty interesting, not just musical but visually as well. So basically Paul's saying there that Buddy Holly wore glasses and made glasses, and wearing those style kind of cool again. So John Lennon was happy to wear his glasses just like Buddy Holly. Because of course, influence isn't just music, it's everything, music and image. But it's widely documented that one of the biggest influences on the Beatles was Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. And that is very, very easy to hear.
One trip or another, we met Elvis. It was one of the highlights.
I mean, it was Elvis. He just looked like Elvis.
It was the king, wasn't it? It was Elvis.
This is Mr. Hips, hip swiveling man.
Wow, that's Elvis.
So that's them talking about meeting Elvis, meeting their idol, just like we saw a minute ago, Ozzy meeting his idol, Paul McCartney. This is them talking about meeting their idol, Elvis, obviously back in the day. So no Beatles, no Ozzy, no Metallica, no lots of bands that exist today, but no Elvis, maybe no Beatles. So who influenced the king of rock and roll himself, Elvis Presley? And this is where it's going to start to get a little bit more difficult to find specific artists and specific names, and what we'll probably find is that it's going to just lean more towards a style of music as opposed to specific artists, but we'll find out. So this is Elvis himself talking about his influences.
You see, country music was always a part of the influence on my type of music anyway. It's a combination of country music and gospel and rhythm and blues all combined is what it really was. As a child, I was influenced by all of that. I liked all different types of music when I was a child. Of course, the Grand Ole Opry was the first thing I ever heard, probably. But I liked blues and I liked the gospel music.
Country music, gospel music, blues music. No reference there to specific artists, and I think it's quite hard to find footage of Elvis himself actually talking and naming people specifically. Although, if we look in the sidebar, one thing I noticed, and I saw this earlier, is B.B. King, very famous blues musician, talking about Elvis. Listen to what he says.
You knew Elvis before he was big.
Yes.
And you knew him after he was big.
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Elvis was very shy when I first met him. When I first met him,
was it Sun Studio? Where was it?
Sun Studio in Memphis there. My company that I worked for at the time would always contract Mr. Phillips to let us in anytime that we had something to record. And usually Elvis would be there practicing a lot of times. He had several people, but at that time, he was a handsome guy, good looking. I didn't think too much about his playing or singing. I mean, he was okay, but I didn't see at that time what I saw later on.
Interested in your music?
He would watch. He didn't ask questions a lot, but he would watch.
Because
sometimes.
A lot of people, when they heard Elvis, thought he was black, didn't they?
At first, yes.
Yeah, they said he's playing black music. He's a white guy.
Yeah, but see, at first he was playing more like rockabilly. He wasn't really getting into the things that he started to do later. But when he started to do that, then he started to turn heads, including mine.
So even though Elvis didn't name anyone specifically, this is B.B. King, blues legend himself, talking about when he was recording in a studio. Elvis, before he was famous, was in that studio watching. So I think it's pretty safe to say that B.B. King, amongst many others, was a big influence on Elvis in the early days, because by B.B. King's words, Elvis wasn't necessarily anything special at that time. He was okay, he was practicing. So maybe watching artists like B.B. King in the studio is what shaped him to be the Elvis that we all know. So no Elvis, no Beatles, so no B.B. King, potentially no Elvis. So who influenced B.B. King?
A friend of mine, he and I was in service at the same time, but he was shipped overseas, and he heard of this place called the Hot Club of France. Went there, and he heard this guitarist called Django Reinhardt. It was said that it was a French gypsy. But anyway, my friend knew I liked guitar, so he sent me some records of this guy. Fell in love with him. Then finally I heard of a guy called T-Bone Walker. Those was the people that really made me want to play.
And I would never have really put Django Reinhardt as one of B.B. King's influences, because the style of music is so different. Django Reinhardt is very jazzy. And if you don't know anything about Django Reinhardt, I believe he lost some fingers. Not kind of like Tony Iommi, although that is kind of interesting how we can trace it back from Black Sabbath and Metallica all the way to Django Reinhardt. Django Reinhardt, a very famous jazz musician who played, I think he only had 2 fingers on his fretting hand, so he didn't have all of these, he just had these 2, I think, and then traced that a while back. Black Sabbath, obviously we know Tony Iommi had an incident and lost fingers. There's a weird coincidence there. As you can see, most of the work is happening with just these 2 fingers. Amazing guitar player, and I kind of use this sometimes as an example when I get students that say, I can't play guitar, I don't have the right hands for it. It's like, this guy definitely didn't have the right hands for it, and he still could do it. to a better standard than a lot of people. Didn't make excuses, just got on with it anyway. Django Reinhardt. Weird to think, no Django Reinhardt, no Metallica. They're so different, so much worlds apart, but we've traced it back this far. Can we find out who influenced Django Reinhardt? So for this, we might have to go to Google, because it's hard to find videos about this. So, who influenced Django Reinhardt? Django Reinhardt's musical style was primarily shaped by his exposure to American jazz, particularly the work of Louis Armstrong and Eddie Lang. Louis Armstrong and Eddie Lang. So very, very easy to hear the influence there on Django, who then influenced B.B. King, who then influenced Elvis, who then influenced the Beatles, who then influenced Ozzy, who then influenced Metallica, and then influenced all these bands that we listen to today. So, who influenced Louis Armstrong? Louis Armstrong's musical style was heavily influenced by the New Orleans jazz scene, particularly his mentor, Joe King Oliver. So, I've got a feeling, and I don't know for certain, we're going to find out in a minute hopefully, that this is going to start getting back to slavery, when we all kind of know that blues music, jazz music kind of is rooted from that time period, and we're kind of going further back and leaning more and more towards that era. Joe King Oliver, 1923, that's kind of where we've got to now. Riverside Blues. It's basically a 12 bar. Listening to this is a 12 bar. I mean, think about how many, not only metal musicians, rock musicians, blues musicians were still influenced by this. This is a 12 bar blues, basically, which is still being used widely today. There's still a lot of musicians still making 12 bar blues songs. Who influenced Joe King Oliver? Buddy Bolden and Freddie Keppard.
Charles Buddy Bolden is one of the most influential musicians of the New Orleans jazz tradition. Born in 1877, that's about 20 years before folks were kicked out of Congo Square, and died in 1931. From 1900 to 1907, Buddy Bolden was the most popular musician and band leader in New Orleans.
1900. Born in, what was it, 1877, talking about being a musician in 1900, that's a long time ago.
His influence continues despite the fact that there are no known recordings. We actually only have
no known recordings. So now we've got to a point in time of influence where there is no known recordings of the artists that have then influenced the music of today. That's crazy.
I have one surviving picture of him and his band, and even this picture has mystery. It seems to be...
Wow. You would literally not look at this picture. If you saw this picture anywhere, you would not look at that and think, without these guys, potentially, we wouldn't have so many artists and music that we have today. The world would be a very different place, potentially, without these guys. I know that, there's a lot of if, buts, and maybes involved in this whole thing, but this is the way that I'm looking at it. I find it fascinating. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments.
He played the cornet, similar to a trumpet, and was regarded by his contemporaries as a key contributor to the New Orleans music later to be known as jazz.
So now we've gone far enough back to find a musician who played jazz music before it was even called jazz music. That's amazing. Buddy Bolden was influenced by a variety of musical styles. So now, as I said, it's getting to that point where we can't find specific artists being mentioned. It's just getting to a time period where it's just musical styles in general that were influencing people. A variety of musical styles and figures present in New Orleans. Is it New Orleans or New Orleans? Please let me know in the comments. I never know how to say that. New Orleans, during his time, these included sounds of spirituals, jubilee singing, and the exuberant shouts from his Baptist background. Kind of similar to Elvis. Elvis was influenced, by his own admission, country music, but gospel music too. So kind of getting more into that church music potentially. One of the biggest influences on jazz music in general is blues music. Blues music is literally where kind of most of the music that we have today started. A lot of artists were influenced by that and then took it in various ways, jazz being one of them. So I think maybe, obviously, we know where we're going with this one now. Ragtime and blues. The emergence of ragtime and blues in the late 19th century further shaped the development of jazz in New Orleans. So where did it originate from? Blues music originated in the late 19th and early 20th centuries in the African American communities of the southern United States. Emerged from a combination of African musical traditions, spirituals, work songs, field hollers. The Mississippi Delta is often cited as the birthplace of the blues, and I've heard that a lot before. But, you know, this is talking about people working in fields, you know, who probably made songs on whatever instruments they could find, you know, guitars, who knows, whatever else, or even sometimes just singing. If you listen to some really, really early blues music, there's not even any instruments in the background. It's just singing, you know, how they were feeling, which back in those days was probably not great, because you can imagine their circumstances. There was music before blues music too, don't forget. I'm not saying blues music was the first music ever, but it was the first one that kind of then set off this, as I said, chain reaction of influence over the years, which has led to music as we know it today. Even pop music, rap music, metal music, rock music, all these different genres, you can literally, I think if you trace them all back, we would end up in the same place. Blues music, Delta blues, probably brought over from slaves from Africa and things like that to America, which has then spread. So that's pretty interesting. So I found a video here of the earliest blues recordings.
The singer Mamie Smith was a jazz singer and vaudevillian working for OK Records and backed up by the Jazz Hounds. This is what most people consider to be the first proper blues recording.
Mamie Smith and her Jazz Hounds. So therefore, we do actually have an artist. This is apparently widely regarded as one of the first blues recordings. Crazy blues. Listen to that noise on that recording. That is an old recording. Who knows what the microphone techniques were like. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. What did you guys think of this video? Please let me know. Did you find this interesting? I found it very interesting, very fascinating. As a musician myself, it's always good to know kind of where things started. So, as I said, leave me a comment, let me know your thoughts. Anyway, guys, if you did like this video, don't forget to leave it a like. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more guitar and music related content, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Take it easy.